Good evening. Welcome to everyone who has joined us today for this online engagement session. My name is Wesley Ford and I'm a Community Services Officer at Newport City Homes. I'll be leading today's session and keeping everything on track. Before we begin, to make you all aware, this session is being recorded. The recording will be made available on our website for residents who aren't able to attend today. And you will also receive a copy of the recording after today's session in case you would like to go back and check anything or go through any information that we do provide. Before we do make a start, can I please ask that you do not place any personal information into the chat box. This could be such as your address, contact number, and this is purely for data protection purposes. As many of you will know, in February, we held our very first online sessions for residents to come and talk to us about works within Beechwood. This is something that we're going to look at in more detail today. We expect the session to last for the full hour. We'll answer as many questions as we can and then collate the Q&As we've had for circulation. In this session, it's really important that everyone has the opportunity to share their views and provide feedback. Please be aware that some people may have different opinions to you, and we want to hear from you, as many of you as possible, to share your views. In line with our community guidelines, please be respectful and use appropriate language, as this can be seen by other residents here today. Normally, we would like to be out and about in the local community so you can speak to us face to face. This isn't possible at the moment because of COVID. So we've been trialing this new approach with these online sessions. We really want to hear your views today. We're asking that you do this either by using the chat box, or if you want to use the raise your hand, using the reactions box. We'll invite you to unmute yourself and ask you to voice your query. Okay, so I'd like to introduce you to members of the project team who will be talking to you today. First up, we have Rachel.
Good evening, everyone. Hi, I'm Rachel George. I am the Head of Regeneration at Newport City Homes.
Thanks very much, Rachel. And next up, we have Prav.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Pravin De Silva, Development Manager for Newport City Homes.
Thanks very much, Prav. Next up, we have Simon.
Evening, everyone. I'm Simon Bonstead. I'm an architect from CLTH Architecture. We've been appointed by Newport City Homes to complete an options appraisal for your community.
Thanks very much, Simon. There are also other members of the project team that are here today. They're here to listen to your feedback and help answer any of the questions which may come up later on in the session. As pre-planning consultants are also here, so we'll be able to answer any planning queries that you may have. Okay, so during today's session, our aims are to update you on the survey work we've been carrying out, share the views we have had from you about your home and your local area, talk through the options we have developed, ask you for your views, answer any questions that you have about our work. If you have any questions which aren't answered today, we'll also be sharing a feedback survey after the session, along with our contact details for you to contact us directly. This session is focused on the work that we have been carrying out in your area over the past few months, and we really want this to be an interactive session. If you have any questions about Newport City Homes that aren't a part of this project, like questions about repairs specific to your property, we'll share ways in which you can get in contact with the team at the end of the session. I'm now going to hand over to Rachel.
Thank you, Wes. Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for coming along this evening. The reason that we've been looking at your homes is because at Newport City Homes, we are committed to providing high quality homes for our residents now and in the future. Your block is an easy form construction type, which we think may need investment in the future. One of the key issues that we have identified about your homes are that the layouts about layouts and fire safety. We're going to be talking to you about this in a bit more detail. Also important to Newport City Homes is meeting Welsh Government targets for zero carbon homes, which is something else that we're looking at as part of this work. Simon will talk us through the options in more detail, but for now, I'll just hand over to my colleague Prav.
Thanks, Rachel. As we previously mentioned, we have carried out different types of surveys to understand the issues and to help develop our options. newsletter you receive includes the type of service we carried out in your area. Based on the survey information, we have identified some key issues, such as the roofs are deteriorating and would benefit from some repair works. Some cracking has been identified in the internal and external walls of the blocks. Damp has been identified in several properties, so further damp service is being commissioned. Layouts do not meet the current fire and building regulations because in the bedroom, the exit is through the living room, which is a high risk fire. Our current sprinkler program improves existing arrangements. However, we're looking at whether we can really solve the problem by looking at other options for your homes. The current energy ratings are either EPC C or D, which means the thermal performance is mid-low. Homes may need a lot of heating. Since the online engagement session back in February, you made us aware that there are mixed feelings about your homes and the local area. 20% of you told us that you are either very or extremely satisfied with your home, with 50% of you not being satisfied with your homes at all. The main dislikes include the size and layout of your property, lack of parking, litter, etc. Thank you. Over to Simon from CLTH Architects.
Hi there, evening all. Thank you very much for giving up your evening. Really appreciate you being with us this evening to voice your feedback and give any opinions on the work as they develop so far. Could you flick on to the next slide, please? Perfect. So this is an aerial view of the site that we've been asked to look at on Munnings Drive and Beaufort Road. And we're looking at all of the easy forms which are surrounded by the coloured landscape there. It's worth just talking you around this drawing because we'll be coming back to this drawing as we go through the different options we've appraised as part of this study. At the south there, you can see highlighted is the M4, and just off the drawing to the right-hand side is Newport Nature Reserve. Beaufort Road is the line which is to the west of the site there, which is wrapping over the M4 to the top of the drawing. And in total, we've looked at 180 homes on Romney Close, Landseer Close, Ward Close, Vermeer Crescent, Sickert Close, which are drawn in this plan here. Could we flick on to the next slide, please? So as part of the options appraisal, and based on the information from the surveys we've received, we've decided that there are 4 main options for the future of the easy form blocks on the site. As I mentioned a little earlier, it's worth highlighting that no decisions have been made at this stage, and the purpose of this session is just to create a conversation and hear your feedback about these options. So as I talk you through these options, there'll be an opportunity at the end of each option to give us your feedback, and we really would love to hear from you as to your feelings for what you think about these options. Could you flick on to the next slide, please? So this is the first option, which is take no action. This would include day-to-day repairs and cyclical maintenance work only, which might involve repairs to cracks in the blocks and possibly re-roofing. We're really keen to know what you think about your homes as they are currently. Rachel and Prav have gone through a few of the issues that the surveys have picked up currently, but we are really interested to hear what you think and what you'd think if only maintenance work was to happen. So I'm just going to hand over to Wes, who will facilitate that chat.
Thanks very much, Simon. So yeah, if you have any thoughts or any questions in relation to option 1, take no action, you'll be able to use the raise your hand option in order to ask a question directly to the project team, or you will be able to place your question into the chat box. So I'm going to go over to John firstly to see if there is anyone who has raised their hand.
Hi, Wesley. There have been no hands raised at the moment. I'll let you know if that changes.
Thanks very much, John. Okay, Sam or Clea, if anyone has any questions in the chat box.
Hey, there's a question. It has been identified that works needs doing. Why is this even an option? If it has been identified that works need doing, why is doing nothing an option?
So to help answer that one, I think Because this is an options appraisal, we need to just bear in mind that for the time being, until we've looked at this, we may not be, as Newport City Homes, we might not be committing to doing these works. It's a very, very valid point that if we've identified it, we should be doing something about it. So that will definitely form part of our feedback. Thank you.
And then we've got another comment. If we take no action, that's okay, but will it works? When will it be done?
So I think that would be if we were not going to pursue any of the options in terms of refurbishment or the new homes or the combination of the two. We would need to, with maintenance colleagues, look at any works that did need to be programmed in, and when that might happen. And that would, as I say, happen with maintenance colleagues if that option was selected.
And then we have had some questions before the session, but we'll ask those under the relevant headings of the options as we progress. So if you have posted questions, we will get to them as we work through.
Thanks very much, Sam, and thank you very much, Rachel, as well. For those of you who are not at our live session this evening, you will get the opportunity to ask your questions to the project team. We'll be sharing contact details fairly shortly as we move through the presentation, and it will share different ways in which you can contact us and ask your question or provide your feedback or share your views to the project team. So thank you very much for that, and I'm going to hand back over to Simon.
Thanks, Wes, and thanks all for getting involved and providing your feedback. If we could flick on to the next slide. Perfect. So as part of the survey work and assessing the survey information that we received, we've put together this section, which is an environmental section through a typical easy form 3-story block. The arrows are showing heat transfers from outside to in and inside to out. And unfortunately, due to the construction type, the easy form types are quite leaky of heat. So a lot of the heat that's being generated in order to heat up the space is leaking out through windows, through gaps in the windows, and through the attic space, which could be insulated more. Next slide, please. So in order to improve the thermal efficiency, in order to reach the net zero homes standard, which Rachel has mentioned, we've identified a series of options which we'll go through in this presentation. Upgrading the insulation, replacing the windows, replacing the existing gas heating with electrical heat sources, and possibly adding solar panels on the roof. Whilst making these changes, we will look to increase the size of the flats via internal alterations, such as building over the existing balconies and adding larger external balconies. And we'll also, as part of this work, potentially be looking at updating the external finishes and reconfiguring the bin stores. If we could flick onto the next slide then. So these are pointing out where some of these changes might take place. So in order to improve the thermal efficiency of the windows, it would require removing them and replacing them with triple glazing. We could look at re-roofing because there are issues with the condition of the roofs on some of the blocks. There is an issue with the condition of some of the existing planters outside of some of the windows, so those would need to be removed. And adding solar panels for electricity production on the roof there. If you look onto the next slide. So this is looking again at that section and some of the alterations that might be necessary or we might be looking at. So the green lines there are the alterations to your existing blocks. And what we'd really be looking at as part of the thermal strategy is wrapping a new warm fleece around the outside of the building and through the attic space. To create a continuous line of insulation in order to keep the heat that you're generating in your homes and stop it leaking out to the outside world. So we'd be looking potentially at adding triple glazing in, a large layer up to 400 mil thick of insulation in the attic space, photovoltaics or solar panels on the roof to generate electricity on site, new bigger balconies to the south to shade the glazing from excess solar gain or excess heat from the sun, and altering the bin and bike stores, which currently don't offer much to the street. So we could look to place those in a better place and update the construction of those buildings. Go on to the next slide, please. So we've taken a look at an existing floor plan. in this particular easy form, there are 4 flats per block, but there are some larger blocks as well. And the blue lines are dividing where each flat is. We could flick on to the next slide, please. So first of all, in order to increase the size of the flats, by building over the existing balconies, we can make your flats bigger. Next slide, please. And then to address the issues that Rachel and Prav have mentioned regarding fire and escape from the living space and from the edge of your flat to the corridor, we could create a central escape corridor with fire-rated doors. We could also look to combine the living room and the kitchen into the edge of the flat into a triple aspect or double aspect room with lots of light in, and we feel like this would be a big improvement. Next slide, please. Some of the blocks seem to have slightly messed up there, but we could then add the bedrooms onto the south of the block with a new larger balcony, as I talked about earlier, with potentially access from the bedroom and the living room, and also creating solar shade from the sun. Go on to the next slide, please. So this is looking at the existing south elevation of the easy form blocks, with the inset balconies which are currently there. And if we just flick onto the next slide. So one possible option to refurbish your flats, once we've added on the insulation to the outside of the blocks, would be to reclad the blocks in brick. And we'd be really interested to hear what you think about that. Obviously, it's quite a radical change to the blocks, but other options will be available. And then we could then add on these bigger balconies outside of those outside of that brick cladding, with potentially some new areas to plant built in within those balconies. As well as that, we could look at re-roofing the roof, and one option we're looking at is metal zinc roofing, possibly coloured in red to match the brick. But again, we're at a very early stage, and any decisions on colour or material choices haven't been made, and we really want to hear your feedback on that. Last thing to mention on this drawing, if you picture your flats as they are, this view would currently have the bin stores blocking the site of the main entrance at ground floor level, and we could look to re-provide those on the edges of the blocks, so that they're more out the way and you get more light into your ground floor flats. Next slide, please. So this is looking at, coming back to that aerial view we looked at the start of the presentation. This would be what the changes, all of those changes would look like from an aerial view. And as you can see, you can pick out, hopefully, the red balconies there sticking outside from the old blocks. In addition to this, your blocks would be, the floor area would, the floor footprint, sorry, would expand ever so slightly to accommodate for that new insulation which is wrapping around the buildings. Next slide, please. Sorry, so I will just hand over to Wes at this stage to just ask if you've got any feedback on the refurbishment option before I get too carried away and rush into the next option. Thanks, Wes.
Thank you, Simon. I'm going to step in here at this point actually and just talk about the impact that the refurbishment option could have on residents and on leaseholders. So just to touch on that, the impact on residents would depend on the amount of works that we were going to be carrying out in any refurbishment. We would look to see if we could carry out the works while you remain in your own home. However, depending on the level of work to be completed and the number of homes we will be working on, it may be that we would need to move you out of your home. This may be on a temporary or a permanent basis. We don't know at the moment, and we'd need to look at this in more detail in any next stages. In terms of the impact on leaseholders, again, this would depend on the extent of works carried out and the type of works that we did go ahead with. We wouldn't normally include leaseholders in our refurbishment works, though some works you might be able to opt into if you wanted to contribute and have the works carried out. If you were able to If they were works that were integral to the block, say the roofing or the cladding, for example, we'd need to talk to you in more detail about the impact on you and how that would work with getting those works done. And now I will hand over to Wes to take us through the questions.
Thanks very much, Rach and Simon. Some really good, useful information there. So again, we're at the stage where we'd like to hear your thoughts on this. If you've got any questions or you'd like to share your views in relation to option 2 refurbishment, I really do encourage you to get involved. Please use the chat box or use the raise your hand option to ask your question, share your view. I'm just going to go over to John if we can, and just have a look if anyone has raised their hands at this stage.
Hi Wesley. No, nobody's raised their hands at this point. Again, I'll let you know if that changes.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, John. So I'm going to go over to Sam and see if anyone has placed anything into the chat box. Sam, has anyone asked any questions?
Hi, yes, we've got a few questions in the chat, so I'll just work through them one by one if that's okay. If we do work, go with the work option and tenants are working, would we work around them and their working hours?
Yes, absolutely. So in these circumstances, we have a dedicated team of colleagues who will be working with tenants throughout any refurbishment programme, or if we were just sort of carrying out other works of the block, so yes, it would be done in discussion with you. As I've said, in the refurbishment option, it may mean that we need to move you out of your home to carry out the works anyway, so you wouldn't be present while they were taking place.
Okay, and then why are some areas not paying for the works and some are going to be very expensive for leaseholders?
So the leases in place between Newport City Homes and our leaseholders specify works that can be charged for and works that aren't charged for. We're not able to get into the detail of that here because we don't know precisely what works we'd be looking at. We've just given you an idea of what that could be. So if we were to look at the refurbishment option, we would come back and talk to you in more detail as leaseholders about which works we might charge for and which works we might not charge for.
Okay, and then the next 2 questions are linked. So why do leaseholders have to opt in or out? And surely the work is doing improvements. If that's the case, why should we be charged for them anyway? I think you've covered that a little bit in your answer, Rach, but if you could reiterate and answer the other question.
So in terms of opting in or out, so for example, the windows, you may as leaseholders have just done your windows and you wouldn't need us to do windows for you, in which case you wouldn't want to opt in. If you needed new windows anyway or thought that your windows could do with an upgrade and we were doing it, it might be beneficial to you to opt into our programme. That's what I mean, whether some works that you might want to get done and opt into. The other part about charging, I think I have answered, and we won't know that until the next stage of looking at this, if this is the option that we go with.
Okay, and then there's a question about the roofs. Are they pitched or flat? I think that might mean in the plans moving forward, will they be a pitched roof or a flat roof?
I can jump in there if you'd like. The roofs of the main blocks we're proposing would remain pitched. The bin stores we were proposing at the moment to have as flat roofs and potentially integrate balconies around, but all of these things are open at the moment to your feedback.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. That was Councillor Townsend. I should have said who that was asking that question.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, there's a few more questions as well, so I'll just carry on if that's okay. So we are leaseholders, will we be forced to accept these internal changes?
No, I think internal changes are very much one of the things that would be down to you if you wanted them or you didn't want them. So no, I don't think that we would force any internal changes on any leaseholders.
Okay, there's still some more, so I'll just carry on. So for the refurb work, we would have to move. If we did move, would we stay in the area?
So if we needed to rehouse you for the refurbishment option, or when we get there for the new homes option, we would want to rehouse you in the local area if that's what you wanted. Now, because we're talking about quite a lot of homes here in one place, it may be that we would be able to look at what we call a phased rolling programme. So we would start by carrying out works in one block, for example, then we might be able to move you directly into the refurbished homes, and then refurbish your home after that, and then move someone else in. We will try to make sure that if you want to stay in the local area, that's exactly what you can do. We would ideally like existing residents to benefit from any refurbished homes, and it would be interesting to get your views on whether, in terms of being able to move back to your current home, we'd facilitate that if we could, but we might need to look at rehousing you permanently somewhere else, but that would be within the area. Yeah.
Okay, you've just covered the next question then. So if we are moved out, are we guaranteed to come back? There's another question around timescales. So how long would the work take?
So again, we don't know the timescales of this, I'm afraid, because we're at the early stages of just sort of looking at what work we might carry out. So if we were to look at this option, we would come back to you with more detail about things like timescales.
Okay, and what if somebody wanted to opt into the work and some didn't? Who pays for the work to be done?
So I think I might have covered this already. So it would depend on what the work is. If it was like windows, for example, and you didn't want it done, you wouldn't have it done, and therefore you wouldn't pay for it. If you wanted the windows done and you were sort of opting into that, then I think at the moment we'd be looking for you to pay for that. When it comes to looking at the roofs and the external cladding, and that really comes back to the terms of your lease, and is something that we will be looking at in more detail with you in the next stage.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. If you were thinking of refurb, why would some people have to move permanently?
Because of the number of homes that we're looking at and the amount of work that we're looking at, we would need to look more carefully at the implications for people and for the programme in terms of moving people twice or moving people once. And we would just need to look at that in more detail, really, just because there'll be quite a lot of work to do across your whole estate, really.
Okay, and then there's two questions on costs. So there's one about what type of costs are we looking at, and then another from a leaseholder who's recently purchased her property, and they weren't aware of the options appraisal, and they're asking around obviously why it wasn't part of the process when they bought the property, and around the costs, the estimated costs.
Okay, so there's several questions in there about estimated costs, and I'm afraid we are at too early in a stage for us to reliably give you any information about costs, because at the moment we're just doing this options appraisal to look at the works that we might carry out. So we don't know about costs yet, and it may actually be that the person who has said about buying their home very recently, it may be that it would be beneficial to have a more one-to-one conversation rather than trying to address that here. So by all means, if you wouldn't mind getting in touch with Wesley or Kelsey, whose details are going to be at the end of this, and then perhaps we can have a chat outside of this session.
Okay, there's a few more comments and questions around moving and the sizes of the properties they can move into, and if their needs have changed since they move in. Can they choose a house, or does it have to be a flat?
So if we needed to rehouse you permanently as part of this process, we would go through a very detailed process working with you individually about your housing needs and about your aspirations. If we were needing to move you to carry out works, then obviously it would influence your priority on the home option system. And if you wanted to be able to look for a house and your housing needs meant that was suitable for you, that is something that we would try to facilitate for you. Obviously, I can't make any individual guarantees, but if we were needing to rehouse you, then we would we would want to be talking to you about your needs and your preferences.
Okay, and then as a leaseholder, an option to sell my flat back to Newport City Homes.
Sorry, Sam, please would you repeat that for me?
As a leaseholder, will there be an option to sell the flat back to Newport City Homes?
You are not the first leaseholder to ask that question. I'm assuming that you mean if we were looking to carry out refurbishment works, whether we buy your flat back from you. That's not something that we would immediately look at in a refurbishment option, but as I say, we have been asked this query quite a lot, and so it is something that we will include in our feedback when looking at these options. So we will bear that in mind.
Okay, then the question around car parking. Will the number of car parking be increased during this project, and will public chargers installed for electric vehicles?
Simon, I don't know whether we've gone into the specifics of the numbers of car parking spaces, but I think that in a refurbishment option, we have included some improvements to the sort of the public realm, and that would include some improvements to parking, and we would look very carefully at the number of parking spaces we were providing to make sure that it was an appropriate number for the number of homes.
Yeah, that's something we've looked at. There are sort of inherent difficulties with the parking levels, as you'll be aware of, due to the changes in gradient and level as you go down the sites, which make parking a bit tricky. But all of our options are looking at re-providing more parking, and Rebuild especially looks at the most amount of parking.
I'll ask these last two questions in the chat, and then we'll carry on if that's okay. So would you rehouse private renters whilst the work is being carried out?
So if you were renting privately in the refurbishment option, it's unlikely we would look at rehousing you, because it may be that your leaseholder isn't looking to opt into the scheme to have the works done, and if they did want that done, then we would talk to you and the leaseholder about it, but I don't think that's very likely, because you wouldn't be one of our tenants and we wouldn't be expecting to carry out those internal works. And I think if we'll come back to this question again, maybe Sam remind me, under the new homes option.
Okay, and then it says you keep on mentioning the terms of the leasehold. Are all of these the same for all the blocks? If they are, please can you explain the terms and what the leaseholders are obliged to pay for?
So I think that that's more appropriate for a conversation between the leaseholders and Newport City Homes. It's not something that I'm going to go into in detail here. If you're a leaseholder, you'll have the terms of your lease, and we'd be talking to you about that if we were looking at a refurbishment option.
Okay, that's all from the chat for now.
Yeah, thanks very much, Sam, and Rachel for your answers there. Thank you. So, as I said previously, if you've got any questions as we go along, please comment into the chat section or use the raise your hand option. If you haven't been able to join us for the live session this evening and you're watching a recording, we'll be sharing contact information very shortly and sharing ways in which you can contact members of the project team to give us your thoughts, share your views, and ask any questions that you do have in relation to this project. So I'm going to hand back over to Simon now, who's going to take us through option 3, build new homes.
Thanks very much, Wes. So here we've got a site plan looking at the new homes option, and this option would likely have the most impact on residents, but we've explored it to see if we could create a positive outcome for you, the residents, in the future. So this option could result in new 2 and 3 bedroom houses and new 3-storey flats. Because they'd be new, they'd be ultra low energy, and would be even more thermally efficient than the retrofit option. There'd also be placemaking improvements, such as a new park on Lavery Close, building over the existing street there, so that residents could access the park directly from their door, and a new nature walk on the former Ward Close on the east side of the plan there, going up the hill towards the nature reserve. There'll also be new play areas, better off-street parking, as one resident just mentioned, in front of all of the houses and flats, and importantly, integrated sustainable drainage systems, such as rainwater gardens and new rain-absorbing planting in front of many of the houses on the street frontage and running down the hill as part of the new park. This site shows a potential option for this new build on the whole of the site, and through this option, it would be possible to achieve 185 new homes. So just to talk you through the plan, as I know this could be quite hard to read. At the south of the site there, the green squares would be new 2-storey homes, and the light blue squares would be, or light bluey greeny squares would be new 3-bed homes. And then as we step up the site, these would be new flats which weave around all of the existing trees and would look to try and not to remove any trees which aren't already in poor condition. And we'd actually be looking to add significant amounts of new planting of trees going down this linear park on the east side next to the nature reserve and creating this buffer from the new housing to the nature reserve, and also around the new park on Lavery Close. If we go on to the next slide, please. As you'll probably know better than anybody, on your site there are a lot of constraints because of the gradients and the amounts that the existing easy forms are sunk down into the existing sites, and because of the way that they were constructed, a large amount of earth was excavated as they were constructed, which means the roads are often considerably higher than the entrance level. In addition to that, there are also a lot of below ground services running through the roads, and we're unable to build on these zones. And as I mentioned just a little earlier, we wouldn't want to disturb any of the roots of the mature existing trees. So as part of our rebuild or new homes option, we've looked to really weave these new flats and houses around these constraints and to create better views of these existing trees and more thermally efficient, better homes. Can I have the next slide, please? So this is an aerial view of what we've just talked through. So as you come into the estate, as you get to Lavery Close, you could walk through this new park, which could be quite active. There could be a play area as you walk in, and then you could come up, instead of going up past the former garages site, you could come up a new nature path with rainwater gardens and new tree planting and accessing the Newport Nature Reserve as you come towards the southeast of the site here. One option we've looked at on the island is it could be possible to have a larger play area at the island, just in the southwest there, which is currently used for turning vehicles, and there's some parking there at present. But we could also have off-street parking coming off all of the roads and next to your flats or new houses. At the south of the site, hopefully you can just pick it up. Those are the new houses with gardens, which would be sunk down and sheltered from the motorway to the south. Next slide, please. So this is the next option, but just before I've got slightly carried away, Rachel and Wes are just going to ask if you've got any feedback on this option before we go on to the option 4.
Okay, all right, great. Thank you very much, Simon. So just to explain a bit more then about the possible impact on tenants and leaseholders if we were to look at an option of rebuilding new homes and demolishing existing homes. So obviously in this option, if we were going to be demolishing the homes, we would need to be rehousing all of the tenants, all of you tenants. Now, as I explained a bit previously, we would look to see if we could do this in a phased rolling programme where we just moved you once. So it may be that in a particular area, we could start there. It may mean that we need to move some residents away from your precise homes, but still try to keep you in the local area, just so that we can start somewhere really with the programme, then demolishing homes and building. And then what we would look to do is to move residents from another block into the new homes, so that people only generally, as far as possible, only moved once into the new homes if that's what you wanted. And then we would demolish behind where we'd left those empty homes and build new homes and then move the next lot of residents in. So we'd be able to try to do it in a sort of a phased rolling way, as try to reduce the impact on you as we did that. For leaseholders, we would need to buy back your homes in this option. Now, I know that we've had a number of questions about this, so I might just answer these as we go through. So, valuation, in terms of the valuation process. So, if we were looking to buy your home as part of this option, we would use a valuer that is registered with the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, that's RICS. Now, we do that because RICS, that body, are the governing body, they're accredited, and they make sure that the valuer or agent who values properties does it to the right standard, and they're qualified to do it in the right way. Now, we would carry out a valuation as Newport City Homes. If you wanted to, you could also get your own valuation by a RICS valuer done. We would pay for that, and then the two valuers would negotiate on our behalf until we were both happy with that. So yes, you could get your own valuation. In terms of ownership options, we take our communities very, very seriously in our homes, and we fully appreciate people who own their own home. So particularly if you live in a home already and we were going to buy it back, we would, if we could, want to facilitate you having other home ownership options in the new development, which means that we would be able to provide you a home that you could buy, and we would look at affordable ways of doing that. I don't have an awful lot more detail to share on us at the moment because we're at quite early days in looking at this process, but just to reassure you that if you're a homeowner and you live in your home, we would want to provide affordable home ownership options for you. Then, so that's if that's for homeowners. For private tenants, that we said that we would come back to you. Now, it would be really the responsibility of your leaseholder to talk to you, because your actual arrangement for housing is with your leaseholder. So they would need to talk to you as well and give you like the dates and things that they need you to move out. In reality, also we would work with you. The team of people that I mentioned earlier that would talk to our tenants would talk to you as well to see if we could help you out with any rehousing options. Now, I'll pass back over to Wes now for questions.
Thanks very much, Rach. So again, if any of you have any thoughts or questions in regards to option 3, please use the raise your hand option or place your comments into the chat box. I really do encourage you to get involved. I'm trying to get as much feedback and as many views as possible. We are taking this very seriously, and so going to go over to John now and have a look if there's anyone who's used the raise your hand option. John, has anyone raised their hand?
Hi, Wes. No, nobody's raised their hand at this time.
Okay, thanks very much, John. I'm just going to go over to Sam now to check if we have any further questions in the chat box.
Hey, Wes, yeah, quite a lot of questions in the chat box and comments, so I'm going to work my way through what I did last time. Would we get first refusal of a property back in this area, as we want to stay close to family if demolition goes ahead?
So I don't know exactly what's meant by sort of first refusal of a property, but how the process that I've explained would work. However, yes, we would, if you want to stay in the local area, we would want that too, and we would look to make sure that could happen either in one of the new refurbished homes or just in another home that was local in the area.
Okay, you've covered the next question about the area they'd be moved to. As we've been going from a flat, would we be able to come back to a 2-bedroomed house?
So I think I touched on this earlier. So we would be talking to tenants if we were moving you, and we would be looking at your housing needs and about your housing preferences. And if we were having to move you because of one of our options or work to your homes, and you were in need, and that meant that you were suitable to live in a house, we would support you in that if that's what you wanted. I think I've said it's quite hard for me to make any sort of individual guarantees at this stage, but we would be talking to you about your needs and your preferences in terms of any moving.
Okay, and will you be doing right to buy?
We won't be doing right to buy. That is something that the Welsh Government has ended now. However, that we would be looking at affordable home ownership options for existing leaseholders when they live in their own homes. If as tenants you're interested in low cost home ownership options at Newport City Homes, we are at the moment building a range of different affordable housing products. So if that's something you're interested in, then please actually get in touch with Kelsey at the end, and it may be something that we can help you with.
Okay, what are the compensation packages?
So the compensation packages are, if you are a tenant of Newport City Homes, you get a payment called home loss, which I believe is around £6,000. Plus, in addition to that, expenses paid for the moving process. If you are a leaseholder, we buy your property back at the market rate. If you live in your property, you also have a payment of 10% of the value of the property as compensation. If you do not live in your leasehold home, your compensation payment is 7.5% of the value of the property.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. There's a comment that it wasn't felt that the last question was answered around the cost to the leaseholders. Will they be obliged to pay for any works and Newport City Homes deemed compulsory? And then linked to that, then there is a question around, will we be holding a separate session for leaseholders to discuss the options?
I'm sorry that you feel I'm not answering the question. I am answering it as fully as I can at this stage, because we do not know the level of works or the precise works we are talking about. So I'm not able to say what leaseholders would have to pay for, because some of it you might want to opt into, some of it you might not want to opt into, and some of it, like I've explained, where it's shared works to the blocks, like the roof and the external wall insulation, we would need to be talking to you. It would depend on the precise terms of your lease. And I think the best thing really to say is that if we were to look at a refurbishment option, we would, yes, then at that point arrange a separate session with leaseholders to talk to you about the likely implications for you, and we would talk to you about that, of course, in detail, yes.
Okay, thank you. If we move for rebuild and the flat is a house, will we get to move back in the house? If not, would we stay where you moved us? So if they move and they're currently in a flat and they move into a house, can they stay where they were moved to?
So if we needed to move you
That means
temporary or a permanent basis, we would always move you to somewhere that met your needs, because it may be that even if we moved you temporarily, you decided you preferred it and you wanted to stay there, and we'd want that to be suitable for you. So it doesn't matter whether it's a house or a flat. If it meets your needs and you're there, then yes, you could stay there.
okay. Where in the local area will you place us? There are no empty properties. So
this isn't going to be happening straight away as a process. We are just at the very early stages of looking at the options appraisal. Maybe that following our board review of this work, we're able to come and talk to you about what next steps there may be and when that might happen. There's obviously a lot of you as households and families. So if we were looking at any sort of rehousing, it would take a long time to organise that. And it would likely be a sort of quite a process over a long period of time. So it's even if there aren't any homes right now, that there sort of would be over time, and we would work through that process with you.
Okay, thanks. Will leaseholders be able to view specific survey results for their individual flat and the block that their property sits within? If so, how, where and when can they view these results? And if not, why not? Do we not deserve to be fully informed?
Okay, we'll take on board that that you'd like that to happen. We don't have we haven't done 100% survey, so as you probably know, because we haven't been in touch with all of you, we've carried out a representative sample of surveys. If we were to carry out further works and you wanted that information, we would work with you to provide that for you.
Okay, you've covered the one on moving costs. Would any valuation take into account the damage caused by damp throughout the property caused by previous works carried out by the council?
Now, any valuation process takes into account the general condition of the property. If you felt that your property had been negatively impacted by, we are Newport City Homes now, not the council, just to sort of say, but if you felt that we had negatively impacted on that, then that would form part of the discussions. It's hard for me to qualify that absolutely without understanding the situation and knowing the issues, but it would certainly be part of the discussion and you would be able to influence that, yes.
Okay, and then there's just one more. As a leaseholder, would I be offered a new property in the rebuild option?
Yes, that's what we would want to be doing. Yes, again, I'm not able to make any sort of hard and fast promises because we're at such early stages, but yes, we would want to accommodate leaseholders in affordable home ownership options in a new build, yes.
That's it, Wes, for the comments for now.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Sam, and thanks, Rachel, for...
There's a hand up though, Wes.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Rachel, as well. So we're just going to go over to John now, who's going to look at the raise your hand section. And John, over to you.
Okay, Mauro Williams has raised their hand and they are already unmuted. So Mauro, if you'd like to ask your question.
I'm a tenant for a private leaseholder. So what would happen if I became homeless as a result of maybe, say, deciding to demolish the buildings, and then obviously we would have to leave. So if we become homeless as a result of the action or the decision made by Newport, what happens to the people that are going to effectively be homeless? That's a real concern, obviously. I mean, I'm 61 years of age, and I don't fancy being out in the streets at 61.
Rest assured, we wouldn't let that happen to you. It's hard for us to say as Newport City Homes with private tenants, because some people who rent privately are quite happy and quite able, when they get served their notice from their private landlord, to look elsewhere. They might be happy to move somewhere else. You know, they're the tenant of a private landlord and they might have their own means to go and rent again somewhere else. If you weren't in that situation and you were worried about it, as I said before, our team of people who would be talking to our tenants would talk to you as well, and we would help you with any home options that you needed to be helped with.
Okay, thank you very much. That was a nice and honest answer.
Please rest assured, we wouldn't see you homeless.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your question there, and thank you very much, Rachel, again. So thank you very much, everyone, for all of your questions on option 3. For anyone who is watching the recording and is not able to have made the live session, we'll be sharing contact information fairly shortly for you to ways for you to contact us with any of your views, your questions. That will be coming up shortly towards the end of the presentation. So be assured, if you're not here watching the live session, you will get the opportunity to share your views and ask your questions. So I'm now going to hand back over to Simon, who's going to take us through option 4.
Hi there. Thanks, Wes, and thank you all for your comments. It's really useful to hear your views of those options. As the title sort of gives away, refurbishment and rebuild is option 4. And in this option, we're looking to combine the best parts of refurbishment and rebuild. But obviously, as this is an options appraisal, we're very open to your feedback, and in a way, this can be altered to suit your feedback. And this is just one suggestion. Due to some of the constraints mentioned previously, the sustainable drainage and the underground utilities and the steep nature of the site, some areas of the site, of the total site, are more difficult than others to provide a new build option on, particularly the north area and the south area of the site, where because the easy forms are sunken into the ground, it's difficult to create a passage for sustainable drainage. So this is one option with, I'll just talk you through it very, very briefly. One option is to retain the 3 blocks at the north of the site, retain those 3 easy form blocks on Renoir Road and Munnings Drive, and also retain and refurbish the blocks on Vermeer Crescent and Sickert Close at the south of the site. Then in the middle, we'd still be in this option providing the same upgrades to the play areas and the new parks and the parking and the new homes in that central portion of the site. This option would achieve a total of 193 new homes, but we really think that the real pro of this option is that it gives you, the residents, a chance to get more involved in shaping your community, because obviously this might have the potential to tailor it around leaseholders and that their views of what they want doing with their homes. Back to you, Wes and Rachel, for any feedback on this option.
Thank you very much, Simon. Okay, so in terms of the impact on tenants and leaseholders for this option, it would really depend on whether your home was in an area that we were looking at for refurbishment or for new build. And really all that I've said so far would apply in each of these scenarios. So if we were refurbishing your home and your block and you were a tenant, then we would look to see if we could keep you in your home while we carried out the work. And if we couldn't, then we would need to look to rehouse you, and that might be on a temporary permanent basis or a permanent one, depending on the works that were carried out. If you're a leaseholder in a refurbishment element, you may choose to have some of the works or not. And then we'd obviously need to be talking to you about any external works that we were needing to be carrying out to your block. If you were in an element, a part where we were looking at demolishing homes and building new ones, then everything that I said in the new build option would apply to you if you're a tenant or a leaseholder or a tenant of a private owner. If you need me to go through any of that again, then I will do, but for now I'll just pass over to Wesley.
Thanks very much, Rach. So in regards to option 4, if anyone has any questions or you'd like to provide any feedback or just share your views in general, please use the raise your hand option or use the chat box to ask your question or share your views. I'm going to go over to John first to see if there is anyone who has raised their hand.
Hi, Wes. At this time, there is no raised hands, but obviously I'll let you know if that changes.
Thanks very much, John. I'm going to go back over to Sam and see if anyone has commented into the chat box.
Hi, Wes. Yep, there's a few questions in the chat box. So would you tell us when we would have to move and help us to move? I've already lost one property and I'm concerned I'm now going to lose another. I feel like no support. Would you offer support for it?
For the time being, we aren't looking to rehouse anybody because of this work. And we've got probably some way to go before that would happen if we were pursuing any of these options. So we're not able to help you through this tailored process in terms of any rehousing now. By all means, contact Wesley and Kelsey on the contact details they provide if you do want to ask us about any of it. But as we aren't rehousing people through this, that's not currently in some of the sort of the detailed support that I mentioned that we'd be able to give you, I'm afraid. But we would offer it when we sort of start the rehousing process, and you would get plenty of notice of that happening.
Okay, and then will there be an option for leaseholders to spread the cost of any renovation works? Will affordability to leaseholders be looked at on an individual basis? Or will leaseholders just be charged a blanket fee for their share of the cost, regardless of their situation?
Very, very interesting points. And I think it's probably best that we just take that as feedback for the time being, and that we would be able to discuss those questions with you if we came back to talk to you about a refurbishment option and what those works would be. I think they're really, really valid asks of us, and we will have to get back to you if and when we need to talk to you about the refurbishment option.
Okay, and then there's one around time frame. So do you have a rough idea of when a final decision will be made?
So in a second, I'm going to come back and talk about next steps. So put a pause on that one. I'll come back to that question shortly.
Okay, how will you come to a conclusion about the options?
Okay, I'll come back to that one as well.
Okay, and then would you consider purchasing from leaseholders whose properties are proposed for renovation under this option?
I think that question's been asked of us already today and in previous sessions as well. And yes, that is something that we will report as feedback when we're considering our next steps. We have been asked a few times now, so that is something that we will need to reflect on and come back to you about.
Okay, and then there's a final question about a resident who's contacted Newport City Homes about mould and a new window, which is glass. You just palm people off. You've tested the outside brickwork and patched it up and still refuse to take responsibility for it. How can you host a Zoom meeting and not have any figures for holders? It's nonsense. you've drawn up ideas, your architect, you have figures in mind, you just don't want to share them?
We genuinely haven't got as far as looking at any figures for leaseholders. I know that this can seem really frustrating. So because what we're doing as part of our work here is talking to you at the really early stages. So you're getting this fresh, fresh from our work, really. So we could wait and not talk to you for quite some time while we do more work, and then we would have more answers for you. But then we'd have done more work. We'd be further down the line and you wouldn't be involved. And actually what we felt the right thing to do was to talk to you earlier in the process, as soon as we start, as we're going through it, which means that we don't have all the answers for you, which I'm sorry, I know is frustrating, but it's really just because we want to be as open with you about it as possible.
And then some more just come in. So there's another question about how will Newport City Homes come to a decision about the options, which I think you'll pick up in the later slides.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't I come back to my property if it's been refurbished?
So we don't know is the honest answer at the moment. And what I've outlined are two scenarios where either you might be rehoused temporarily or permanently. We would need to look at the implications of those when we look at the exact works that we might be proposing to carry out. And we're very happy to take your sort of feedback and views on that point. And we'll include that in our feedback and our thoughts going forward.
Okay, and then the last one then before we move on. So will there be another Zoom meeting when the decision is made?
We will certainly get back in touch with you as soon as possible once the board have been reviewing the options. And if residents would like us to facilitate another Zoom meeting, then yes, certainly we will communicate with you through letter and newsletter, and we'll do a webinar if that's an appropriate thing to do. Yeah.
Another question's just come through. Did you want to pick that up now, or yeah, is that okay? So currently I live in a 2-bed property. Will I be put in a 1-bed property as I live alone?
So it's not really appropriate for me to comment on individual circumstances as part of this session. If we were to look at one of these options and we needed to rehouse people, we would have some colleagues who would come and talk to you individually about your housing needs and preferences, and we take it from there. So I think we would need to have that individual conversation rather than.
And just another one just come through as well. So just to comment, really saying they wish there was more information for leaseholders, and we're feeling their frustrations, aren't we? So if we can just reiterate that for them, please.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, and then sorry, another one just come in. I really don't understand all of this. All they want to know is will they be able to? Will I be housed back in Sickert Close?
So that depends on the option that we look at, and it depends on whether we are able to have people remain in their homes while we carry out any refurbishment works, or whether we need to move you temporarily or permanently. I appreciate that means that I'm not giving you the answer that you want to hear. It's not a very clear answer. All I can do is be honest with you at the moment and say these things, we're still looking at them in detail, and we'll need to do that in the future when we are looking at the options in terms of what we might do.
Okay, that's it from the chat.
Thanks very much for that, Sam, and thank you again, Rach. So, as I said previously, if anyone who is not able to attend tonight's live session, the session is being recorded and will obviously be available for those to watch afterward. If anyone tuning in to the recording who is not here today live, if you have any questions or you want to provide any feedback at all, we'll share ways in which you can contact either myself or other members of the project team shortly. So I'm now going to hand back over to Rachel.
Thank you, Wes. Okay, so there were 2 questions that were also asked about next steps, so hopefully I'll cover these off here too. So just to be clear, we haven't made any decisions. What's going on at the moment is that obviously we've got this consultation that is open. You have been sent a survey on the newsletter and also have access to it on the web. You can get to it digitally. So I urge you to please fill out the surveys and let us know what you think about the options. All of our work on the options appraisals and including your feedback on it will be presented to our board in July. They will give an indication of how they think we should be proceeding from there. We'll get back to you as soon as possible after that. We are saying to expect to hear from us during August or September. Appreciate that that is maybe slightly longer than you might want, and we'll get back to you as quickly as possible. We just need to be realistic with you about the timeframes that we might need in order to get back in touch with you, but we will do it as quickly.
Like the boys, like drop everything off. What's that, love? She's throwing stuff down, does she?
Back to you then, Wes.
Thanks a lot, Rach. So we're just going to take another look at the chat box to see if there are any new questions or if we've missed anything. Sam, do we have anything in the chat box that is new or that we've missed?
There's been some comments. I've responded to those directly, and then we've just had another question come in about someone's daughter goes to St. Julian's. I don't drive, so they don't really need to move out of the area. So again, we'll just take that on board, and we'll, if it comes to obviously those options, we'll speak to those individuals and address their needs. Another one's just come through as well about school rates. So I don't know whether you can pick up on staying in the local area again.
Yeah, that's exactly the sort of thing that we would talk to you about. If we were looking to rehouse you, we would be talking to you about your housing needs and preferences, and that would include all of those sorts of things about any local arrangements that you have, the impact that has on you, and we would look to work our way around that to make sure that your housing meets your needs.
Okay, and just I don't know whether Simon can answer this. So in the last option, is Landseer going to be demolished? So that's if someone can answer that for us.
I think as part of the last option, we haven't made any decisions yet, and we really want to get your feedback on which blocks. So this is just one idea of what this refurbishment and rebuild option could look like. But as part of this option, it would be one of the blocks which is rebuilt. But as I said, no decision has been made on this option at all yet.
Thanks, Simon. There's some comments in the chat, Rach, as well about if we were to buy back, obviously then we would have properties to allow us to move people back into. So obviously we'll take those on board as we progress through the options.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Thanks very much, Sam. So some really useful information there. Again, if anyone is tuning in to the recording who's not here at the live session, we will be sharing ways for you to get in contact with us shortly, and it'll enable you to share your views and ask your questions to the rest of the project team. So now we're going to go over to John, see if anyone has used the raise your hand option. John, has anyone raised their hand?
Hi, Wes. No further people have raised their hands now, so obviously I'll let you know if anything changes, but no one at present.
No problem at all. I'm going to go back to Sam and just see if anything else has come into the chat box. Sam, has anything new come in the last minute or so?
Yeah, just one more comment, Wes. So once we find out on or around September, what would then be the next move if it was option 3 or 4? Would it be starting a move-in process then in September or over the next months? So I guess a time frame question there.
It wouldn't be anywhere near as quick as that if we were looking at options 3 or 4. In those cases, particularly with a new build option, we would need to be going through a more detailed planning process, consultation process on the plans, and then we would be looking to secure a contractor, and those two things can take longer than 18 months, or approaching 2 years. So as part of the process of working up those options, we would need to be carefully planning in enough time for any sort of rehousing process. So it absolutely wouldn't be as quick as that at all. Wes, I think
that's it. Yeah, that's it, Wes, on the chat.
Thanks very much, Sam. If anyone here does have any questions or thinks of any questions after the session, like I said, we will be sharing ways in which you'll be able to contact us with your question, sharing your views, and providing any additional feedback that you'd like to provide to the project team. So We're coming to the end of today's session, so just some final information for you before we finish. We really hope that you found this session helpful to understand the work that we are carrying out. Thank you for taking the time to give us your feedback on your home and your local area. So don't forget, please complete the survey online or from your newsletter by the 2nd of July so we can include it in our feedback to the board. As we discussed earlier, we will share this information with the NCH board when they consider how we should proceed with the work in your area. The recording of today's session will be available on our website in the next few days if you'd like to go back and listen again, or you should also receive a copy of the email, the recording via email. In the meantime, if you'd like to get in touch with us, please use the contact details listed in your leaflet and noted on screen now. That's Wesley Ford, which is myself. I'm a Community Services Officer at Newport City Homes, and my contact number is 01633 227 614. Also, my colleague Kelsey Cantello, who is also a Community Services Officer at Newport City Homes, and she can be contacted on 01633 227 637. Alternatively, if you'd rather email us, you can contact us on community@newportcityhomes.com. That's all lowercase. That's community@newportcityhomes.com. This could be if you have an individual repair that you'd like to discuss, or if you'd like to talk about anything you've heard today, or if you have any further questions. So again, if you'd like to email us, that's community@newportcityhomes.com, or please contact me or my colleague Kelsey Cantello on any of the contact numbers above. Just before we finish, we'd like to understand if this session has been useful for you and if you'd like to attend online sessions in the future. You'll see 2 questions on your screen shortly. Please select one of the options to answer it. Okay, we'll just give it another 30 seconds or so, just so everyone can answer that for us. Please, if you can, please answer both the questions that are on your screen. It's really useful for us to know the answer to these 2 in particular. Okay, I'll just give it a few more seconds. Okay, brilliant. That's it from us for this session. Thanks again for giving up your valuable time to join us. We really appreciate your feedback. We look forward to speaking with you again soon when we will have more updates to share. Have a good evening, stay safe and take care.